So, I have been spending a lot of time with Hildryn over the last few days, and if you turned up for my first impression stream, I was relatively lukewarm on her at first. She seemed neat, but not really something that was wowing me, and I didn't really see myself using her much. But as I've tweaked her build and really gotten into the flow of her gameplay, I have changed my stance so much. There's just something about her gameplay that hits me. I can't really put my finger on it. But at the same time, I feel that what we have with Hildryn is a great start. But if the last little touches were put on, oh boy, we'd be cooking with gas. So, since most people haven't had a chance to get hands on Hildryn unless you've shelled out the plat for her, I'm going to make this short little video on her to try and hopefully get some feedback in while we're still in the early phases of her. Obviously, I don't expect, well, any of this to be changed, but gosh darn it, I'm going to try. I can feel that sweet, sweet perfection just on the other side of some tweaks to her kit. I'll also give some context as to why I think these changes would be good, rather than just throwing out some numbers at random. So, without further ado, let's get into how I'd like to see Big Mama Hildryn changed. So, first up, Balefire. Balefire launches some pretty beefy projectiles that are nice and impactful and really make you feel the boom behind them, but this comes at the cost of slowing Hildryn to a crawl when firing, and putting some arbitrary pauses on her movement entirely. My suggestions for Balefire are pretty simple. Firing and charging Balefire only slows Hildryn to a walking/jogging pace, and no longer comes with a massive pause to her movement afterwards. This would greatly improve the feel of her first ability, and generally smooth out her moment-to-moment gameplay. With the current pause shot, it feels like you're hitting speed bumps, constantly hitching in the battle when you should be coasting. Especially since you can circumvent the slow movement while firing in the air, it really just doesn't feel like the pauses add much to her experience, and only bring unneeded clunkiness to her Balefire. Next up is Shield Pillage. Shield Pillage is pretty gosh darn good as it is. The only real issue currently is that it can't be used while in Aegis Storm. Both Haven and Balefire can, so this lack of usage in Aegis Storm mode really stands out. Now, obviously, it makes sense from a balance standpoint. Having an instant flight mode restore would be extremely powerful and largely negates the downsides and decision-making needed while in Aegis Storm in the first place. So, my proposal for this is a bit of a compromise. Allow Shield Pillage to be used while in Aegis Storm, but its range only affects the enemies currently within Aegis Storm CC range. This means that if you want to get some small shield boosts to keep your flight mode up, you can safely do so from on high. But if you're in dire need of a big shield boost, you're going to have to risk going back right into the fray for a big refill. I think this would alleviate the lack of synergy while her Aegis Storm is active without being too overwhelmingly strong, while also slightly relieving some of the negative pressure from using Aegis Storm CC ability to its maximum potential, making it a bit more attractive to actually catch as many people as you can in the big ring. Third up is Haven. Haven is somewhat simple. It's an easy fire and forget ability and largely doesn't need any changes. However, I would like to see his team play buff just a little bit more. Namely, allowing Hildryn to kickstart the shield regen process of her allies, as that big safety net that Mama Hildryn provides can easily be forgotten when it gets shredded within a couple seconds of its first application. The change I suggest for this one is a bit wonky, so it might be a bit too unclear, but I'd give it the limitations I do for the sake of balance, while also, much like my suggestions for Shield Pillage, hope to alleviate the main pressures of using the ability to its fullest. I suggest that when Hildryn casts Shield Pillage, any allies currently tethered by Hildryn will receive a small percentage of shields that Hildryn pillages from enemies currently affected by Haven. So, any enemies getting toasted by Hildryn's lasers will help give a small kickstart to nearby allies, giving a bit more reason to stick close to allies while also trying to gather a big chunk of enemies at the same time. Alright, lastly is Aegis Storm, a super fun ability to use that really makes you feel like a badass Valkyrie ruling the skies. However, while the ability itself feels cool, it doesn't really offer a lot in the form of tangible combat benefits, aside from the elevated vantage points and light CC. I have the most suggestions for Aegis Storm, so get ready. First is that upon activating Aegis Storm, Balefire is also activated. Lumping this onto the base cost of Aegis Storm is, in my opinion, perfectly fine, but at the very least, removing that additional button press would be a massive quality of life change that makes perfect sense, given that she can't do anything but use Balefire while in Aegis Storm. Second, while in Aegis Storm, Hildryn can dash and jet dash. I'll explain more about jet dashing in a second, but giving Hildryn the ability to get bursts of speed and maneuverability while in Aegis Storm really would make it feel a lot more liberating and controllable. Currently, the sluggish pace of Aegis Storm really doesn't bring home that feeling of flight like Titania, and while obviously it shouldn't be as good as Titania's mobility, it still doesn't quite feel as responsive as I think it should. Applying an energy cost per dash would be totally fine, something like 50 to 100 energy per dash. This would make it a cost investment for positioning purposes and also a trade-off for avoiding a hit that would have done potentially more damage. Zipping all over is going to drain much faster, but on the whole it will allow for a lot more control when Aegis Storm is in use. The next changes to Aegis Storm are more to do with how it affects Balefire. When activated, Hildryn pulls out a second Balefire launcher and totally makes you think like things just got real. But the second charger does nothing. It doesn't affect stats or even fire. It's a massive bummer, to be honest. Thus, I suggest that while in Aegis Storm, Balefire uncharged shots fire twice as fast. Emphasis on uncharged shots here. It doesn't double the fire rate, more so it just lets you fire an additional projectile from the other gun, if that makes any sense. Additionally, charged shots will still take the same time to charge, but will get the benefit of double damage, you are firing 2 shots at once after all, and a 50% increased explosion radius. So if you want to trade that constant hailstorm of fire for a big boom shot on a group of enemies, Aegis Storm can accommodate that. I feel these changes to Balefire while an Aegis Storm is active would really make Aegis Storm a comparable choice to standard Balefire, reducing the mobility and sustainability of ground-based Balefire combat in exchange for bigger damage and more general chaos. So, those are all the changes to Hildryn's abilities, but there is something I really want in Hildryn's kit that is, well, to be completely honest, completely new. But I think it would fit extremely well with her thematically, and also be uniquely tied to what her shield energy pool allows for her design. What I'm suggesting is what I referred to earlier as jet dashing. Currently, when rolling with Hildryn, you instead get a short little hop in your desired direction, much like how Limbo Rift dashes. However, unlike Limbo's Rift Dash, which offers mechanical differences, the dash is largely cosmetic. It offers a slightly different momentum arc, but doesn't really change her resistance or interact with her kit in any way. But every time I use it, I feel like it's the startup to something, like she's flexing her shield wings in preparation for a takeoff if needed. Thus, I propose jet dashing. If the player continues to hold shift after performing a standard dash with Hildryn, she will activate her thrusters and propel herself in any given direction as long as the shift is maintained. The damage resistance buff from dashing does not apply to this jet mode, and it essentially turns into an omnidirectional dash, akin to kinda how Arcwing moves, but significantly faster. While jet dashing, Hildryn maintains the movement speed of her dash, incentivizing dodge speed increases via mods, like the new Amalgam mods, which can be stacked on her and her Balefire, hint hint. However, while jet dashing, Hildryn's shields will drain at a rate of 100 per second, meaning that this increased mobility cannot be maintained forever. Additionally, Hildryn can fire Balefire shots while jet dashing, but their cost per shot is doubled, meaning that Hildryn will always have a much faster but costly mobility mode where she can greatly change her position in battle at a hefty cost to her shields. And like I mentioned earlier, this can also be used in Aegis Storm for complete aerial domination. Now, I really feel that this fits thematically with her kit, attack helicopter frame and all that, but it also really capitalizes on the unique system that DE has created with her shield energy pool. Unlike other frames, which have a finite pool that must be replenished by consuming resources or waiting for a Zenric ability to restore, Hildryn has a comparatively massive pool that regenerates on its own and can be harvested from enemies at will. What this means is that Hildryn's energy is comparably less precious than other frames, but is also directly tied to her survivability. Coupling this with the jet dashing as I proposed would really make Hildryn's shield mechanic shine. She would have a resource pool that can be used as stationary tankiness, damage output, or a massive mobility boost at any time, giving her options and greatly promoting player experimentation in moment-to-moment combat, as opposed to just sticking with a single strategy. By making her energy less focused for only casting abilities, players would be encouraged to spend it on those various aforementioned systems as the battle calls for it, and open up playstyles. Want to be the tanky Mama Hildryn that sticks in one spot and protects her babies? Or do you want to be the hit-and-run Hildryn, using a huge burst of temporary speed to deal quick damage before retreating to let your energy come back? Or do you want to be the aerial goddess, raining down death with a speed and intensity that is directly tied to how you decide to manage your energy pool? Again, I know this is a pipe dream, but an omnidirectional dash and a super dash that can be used when it's appropriate are things I love in games, and it would fit right at home on Hildryn's massive Mother Bear frame. So, DE, if you see this, Jet Dashing 2019, pretty please. So yeah, those are all my ideas for Hildryn right now. Again, I love her so much, I haven't had a frame resonate with me this hard in a long time, and I think that only a couple of these changes are needed, namely the removal of Balefire stun and auto Balefire when using her ult, but the other changes would make her so much fun to play, especially jet dashing. Please, I know it's like an entirely new mechanic for a brand new frame, but oh my god, omnidirectional dashing. Think about it. It would be so freaking cool. Okay. Thanks for watching, and bye-bye.